formal period of national mourning, which clearly will include today as the day of the state funeral. So they're leaving Wellington Barracks. Just in the background there we saw the more modern building of the Guards Chapel, which is to one side of the Wellington Barracks themselves. And now we have the Royal Marines leading the way along Birdcage Walk. That is St James's Park that we can see just in the background. And then the Royal Air Force with the King's colour for the Royal Air Force. So this Tri-Service Guard will be in position in Parliament Square, and they'll be facing Parliament itself, facing Palace Yard, the gates to New Palace Yard, because that is where they'll be in a position to wait for the procession to leave Westminster Hall in a short while. The service at the Abbey will start in an hour's time, but before then we have other elements of these processions forming up, and it's not just at this part of Westminster itself, not just in this section of St James's Park, but elsewhere too, because that procession, which will happen after the service, is 1¼ miles long, and that will be forming up during the service itself. That's the biggest military procession that we've seen in London for decades and decades, probably since the funeral of George VI back in 1952. And that will be formed up on the Mall and coming all the way back to Parliament Square. So you can imagine the extent of that. So as we see the heart of Parliament Square there, as the pipers and the drummers make their way, let's join Sophie once again.
Well, Parliament Square really is starting to fill up now. The police, the military taking their places here, and the huge crowds as well lining Whitehall as far as the eye can see. I'm joined by two people from the Royal Variety Charity who are very, very keen to be here today. Peter Hinton and Angelica Lundekesi. Just explain what it's like being here for you right now.
Crowds just here suddenly erupted into spontaneous applause as the band went past. It
is an extraordinary atmosphere.
It's surreal. I know exactly where I'm standing in terms of London, but I feel like I'm in a totally different place. It's very surreal.
Yeah.
Why was it so important for you both to be here from the Royal Variety Charity? The Queen was patron, wasn't she, for her entire reign?
She was indeed, yes. So the Royal Variety Charity put on the annual Royal Variety performance each year. That's our big fundraiser. And for the last 70 years, Her late Majesty has been our patron. She attended 39 performances between 1945 and 2012. And she saw, from Laurel and Hardy all the way through to Lady Gaga.
And the money raised from the Royal Variety, that helps fund the home, the care home that you both work in, and that is for people who've worked in the entertainment industry, in front of the camera, behind it. What has the past week been like for them?
It's been challenging. Many have met the Queen several times in their career, and many are living with dementia, so it's been a case of getting them used to them over and over again, and then going through the raw emotions with them, whether it's crying or telling you the story of when they met the Queen. So it's been challenging, but beautiful at the same time, because they just share their stories and bring out where they did, where they were, and yeah, it's lovely.
And you're holding the flowers that you brought from them. What are you going to do with them now?
So they wanted me to put it by the Queen. So this is from our garden. The residents picked it up and put it together, and they wanted me to leave it by our Queen. So I leave as close as I'm allowed to get to.
Thank you both very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having us. Thank you. Good luck with the marathon.
Well, as we've been hearing the guest there with Sophie, some world leaders have started to gather at Westminster Abbey. They've been arriving, so let's join Fergal again.
And waiting at the Great West door, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, the Archbishop of York, Stephen Cottrell, the Dean of Westminster, David Hall, along with the High Steward and High Bailiff of Westminster. The Archbishop of Canterbury and the Archbishop of York both visited the queue for the Queen's lying in state to meet with people queuing and to offer their thanks and to join them in prayer, a sign of their dedication and respect for the Queen. The Archbishop of York said he'd sung the first verse of Praise My Soul, the King of Heaven, with 3 women who were part of the queue. It was wonderful, he said. And this is a gathering unlike any seen in the modern history of the United Kingdom. But amidst the seating of the world leaders and members of the Commonwealth, it's important to remember this is, above all, a religious service of profound importance to the Queen's faith. A funeral in which the great themes of her life will be reflected: service, duty, constancy, fidelity to that faith. On the organ we're listening to Peter Holder, suborganist of the Abbey. And now more representatives of foreign governments and of territories where the Queen, through the Commonwealth, was head of state. The music today will include pieces specially commissioned for the service, as well as hymns sung at both the Queen's coronation and at her wedding service at Westminster Abbey. To mark her 90th birthday, the Queen listed her 10 favourite pieces of music. One of the hymns was The Lord's My Shepherd, which will feature in the service today. And now we see more representatives of foreign governments, among them the President of Tanzania, the first woman president of that country, a member of the Commonwealth. Also the President of Singapore. There is, of course, much rank, much high presence, but this is an equalizing occasion. Now, approaching the gate are the ladies of the Queen's household. Among them, Lady Susan Hussey, who was close to the Queen, godmother to Prince William, and during the pandemic was the only person who was part of what was called HMS Bubble. And she attended the funeral of Prince Philip alone with the Queen. President Macron of France, who said he had come to, as he put it, partage, to share the pain of the people of Britain. The Queen's fondness for France was evident in the fact that she spoke French, having learned it as a child. The United States, Joseph Biden, and his wife Jill Biden. The Queen last met the Bidens in June last year when she invited them for afternoon tea at Windsor. The Queen first met a serving US President, Harry S. Truman, as Princess Elizabeth in 1951. She met 13 of the last 14 US leaders during her reign, all except for Lyndon B. Johnson. And now we see the beginning of the procession, which will include holders of the Victoria Cross, the George Cross, and the Order of Chivalry. They are entering in procession from under the croft. Leading the procession there, Captain David Lilly, whom I met in Iraq in 2003 during the conflict there. Seven Victoria Cross and 10 George Cross medal recipients have been invited to service, including 1 from New Zealand and 4 from Australia. Johnson Parry, who was decorated for his bravery during the Iraq War. Procession of the Brave.
And outside in Parliament Square, we can see that the Tri-Service Guard of Honour is now in place, facing New Palace Yard, facing the Elizabeth Tower, and ready for that procession to begin. The route from the Hall along Broad Sanctuary to Westminster Abbey, lined by personnel from the Royal Navy and the Royal Marines. And of course, we've been focusing in recent days on Westminster Hall. It is the most ancient part of the Palace of Westminster, from around 1097, and during its long history it's been all kinds of things. It's been a courthouse, it's been a market, it's been a dining room. Well, it's still there. It's a vast space, great sense of history. It's oak, hammer beam roof, and of course it is the perfect setting, grand setting for a monarch's lying in state. Now the massed pipes and drums, well, they've also reached Parliament Square. They're ready to lead off the procession. The drum majors doing their work immaculately as usual. And just across from them there, facing Parliament, the Guard of Honour involving the Army and Navy and Air Force and the Royal Marines band, also there to accompany the Tri-Service Guard of Honour. The bearer party, that's the party that will be in charge of transferring the coffin from the catafalque to the carriage. Well, that's provided appropriately by the Queen's Company 1st Battalion Grenadier Guards, and they will soon be in place in Westminster Hall itself. That's the Guard of Honour that we're seeing there, but the bearer party is soon to be inside. And of course, very appropriate that when we see the Queen's Company, we just think about the fact that its strong bond with Her Majesty is underlined today, because of course the company, the Queen's Company, was Her Majesty the Queen. So it's a special day for the regiment, no question about that, and an even more special day for the Queen's Company. Now, if you'd like more information about the procession order, You can find a specially made graphic on the BBC News Online part of the website, which details the formation and those taking part. There it is, bbc.uk/news, who's in the main procession. And just for me to say this to you, to all of you watching, because this is, I think it's quite an important thing for me to share at this point. These processions are very solemn events. We're talking about a state funeral. So the reason we're giving you all of that information online, especially to do with individuals, is because we don't really think it's appropriate to talk over lots of these processions, and I hope that you understand why we're saying that. So if you want to see individuals named who are taking part, well, then it's available for you online. But when we cover these processions live on BBC One here, we are doing so with minimal commentary, because we feel that is the most respectful way of covering what is a state funeral today. So that's the plan, and I hope that that message is one that you are receiving positively. And with that in mind, let me introduce my next guest, because Paddy Harvison is the former Communication Secretary to, well, the King and Queen Consort now, and indeed the Prince of Wales and the Princess of Wales now, but in a different capacity, a previous capacity. Thank you for coming in, Paddy.
My pleasure.
It's nice to have you with us. What does today mean for you?
A lot, personally. I mean, having worked for the King and the Queen Consort for 10 years, and for Princes William and Harry, to see all of this play out. We actually, as part of his team, were the first to work on the accession these 10 days. Back in I think about 2005-06, we dusted off the old plan. To see it out so beautifully, so elegantly, so in such dignified manner. And then the King himself, honestly, I can't say, it sounds a bit odd to say I'm proud of him, but he's just been magnificent. And I particularly loved his message today saying thank you to the people, because in a way, he's had to lead his family in mourning, but also the nation in mourning. And I think, in a weird way, the nation has sort of put its arm around him, and I think he's really, that's helped him get through this.
The big moment maybe was when he made that first televised address just after the Queen's death, and his eloquence and his readiness really to show how moved he was, I think affected lots of people, and they were genuinely impressed with that, and they were impressed with the way in which he was authentic and honest with people.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not normally an emotional man, but I found it a wonderful, kind of personal and constitutional. He talked as the son of his mother, and also as now the father of the nation, but also very specifically talked about how he would take on the role of king, how he would strive to live up to his mother's example. He also appointed his eldest son as Prince of Wales, so it was full of sort of constitutional importance, but also very personal, and I think all week we've seen that.
We can see Mark Drakeford, the First Minister of Wales, and other political leaders entering the Abbey there. And just underlining again, Paddy, at this point, First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, also coming in. Just to underline the fact that this is a state funeral today, which involves all parts of the UK. Of course, it's taking place in London, but not just all parts of the UK. We've just seen President Macron and President Biden and other world leaders too. It's a British event. In many ways, it's typically British, but it's a global event too.
It is, and of course, the King knows all these leaders, having met them many times. There was a lovely touch there where the President of the United States sort of was waiting and had to wait for the heroes to go ahead of him, and I thought that said a lot. But it's been great to see so many come to London to pay their respects to the Queen, and of course to the new King and his wife, the Queen Consort. So a truly global event.
When people assess the legacy of this just momentous reign of 70 years, and it'll take a long time to assess it properly, because it's far too early still to take a considered view of all of it. Will it be dominated by thoughts of the Commonwealth,